Laura J here today under my money tree. So cheers to surrounding yourself with life and beauty. When we say cheers, there's actually a story behind that in that back in the old days, when you cheersed others, you would all slosh your drinks together to make sure if there was poison in one of the cups, that the one that had poisoned the other would get poisoned too. And so when you say cheers, you are meant to also drink your beer or your brew, because that is how you can prove to be true. And so let that be a lesson to you, and a different one from what I wanted to do today, which is actually part 2 of the victim archetype. So yesterday I did a video about the victim archetype and the scared side, and also the empowered sacred side, which is when the victim becomes the guardian of self-esteem. And personal power and personal boundaries become something the victim is willing to pay the consequence of upholding. And my intention was to just do one video for each of the 4 survival archetypes that we all share in common. And then as I was feeling into it, the victim wanted more time, naturally, because it has been so misaligned and placed into its scared side for so long that we really need to talk about woundology. Carolyn Mace describes woundology as our tendency to bond and connect through our wounds, traumas, dramas, and the ways that we have been put at the bottom and punished or persecuted and needed to be rescued. And right now, collectively, we're experiencing the effects of that with the circumstance that is playing out, and I call con video game, because it is a drama of ultimate proportions. And so if we actually look at it from the perspective of a video game, I want to not say that it doesn't exist and that people are not dying, because there are a lot of people that are dying and being injured. And what I want to also say within that is there is purpose for that. We are all playing out our karma from previous incarnations, and also the choices that we have made to be indoctrination now. Indoctrinated is when we stop thinking for ourselves and allow others to think for us, where we take on the belief systems or BS of a system designed to save itself significant time, energy, money at our expense, and then we make it ours. We place our power fully into the authority and the authorizing body that says this is good information compared to that. And so woundology is part of the inherent training that we have received to bond through our wounds and our problems, and to make the topic of conversation be about people and things that are happening as told by the propaganda box that has moved into our homes, because when the Nazis didn't win the war militarily, the Nazis moved their plan into a covert operation and brought it into the homes of all of those who are willing to be programmed with the programming that is on the screens. And now we all have and are living by screens, as I am even doing in this moment. So I'm not speaking ill against that, because everything has an opportunity to be good for us or not good for us, depending on how we use it. So if we think about the programming piece, and we think about how we've been programmed to be victims in our scared side, reacting to that which is happening outside of ourselves, it's time for us to understand that react and create have the same letters, except create have an extra E, because it is where we choose to put our energy. Whether we will do it in a reactive way, so that we are looking at what is happening around us and acting the same way we or others have in the past, and then expect different results, which is by Einstein's definition insanity, or whether we will use those same letters of reactive and move them into their creative alternative, where we actually respond instead of react, where we use our reasoning mind and also our intuition, which is the heart, which is where we actually use our feelings to feel the truth of the situation, because truth is resonant. And when we are actually in that heart space of feeling truth, then we are able to also feel mistruth. And when we are able to feel mistruth and we are able to feel truth, then we are able to use our rational mind, our reasoning mind, in order to decide how we're going to respond instead of react. And that is when then we become creative instead of reactive, using the same letters in the Scrabble game, as I often say, but repeat, because as the Greeks said, repetition is the key to learning, or the key to mastery is repetition. And so all of this is simply to say that the majority of people have been programmed to have their victim be in the scared side of the archetype of survival that we all share. Now, what we have an opportunity to do now is program ourselves to actually move the scared part of us into the sacred. So the victim, instead of having its energy directed into being scared, can then have its energy directed into being sacred, as I mentioned yesterday about the process I went through with my own inner victim in a meditation that I felt very powerful, which is why I shared it yesterday. And so in moving the victim into the sacred side is to call our victim fully present into this present now moment. And when we actually look at the fact that all time is happening now like a multi-dimensional layer cake, when we call ourselves present, we stop fearing the future and we stop regretting the past, and we actually bring our energy into the moment where we have a choice, where we can choose how we're going to direct our energy, and we can do it intentionally. Because if we are not intentional about the direction of our energy, we will then experience inner tension, which, when not expressed, energy in motion needs to move, and when we stop it from doing so, we create intention. Inner tension with an S, because then that tension within us becomes expressed as dis-ease, cellular disharmony within the cells of our body. So if we were to call our victim into its sacred side, that is when then we are able to actually respect and reflect the boundaries that we have decided ahead of time will become the new standard of our self-image. Now, when we reset our self-image and raise the bar to a higher standard, the ones who are used to connecting with us when our victim is in its scared side of talking about the dramas and the traumas and relating through our wounds, they are not going to enjoy this new choice that you are making, because they don't know how to relate to you from a higher level. They have only had to meet you where you were before. So it can create conflict and some tension within the relationships in your life that you don't need to internalize. It is about becoming the observer and to recognize that as you raise your standards, you can invite others to raise theirs too, but you cannot force anyone into doing anything lest then you become the one the victim wants to punish, because you have then threatened their standing and their self-image. And many people are not willing to go through the effort of actually changing their self-image, and that is not our problem. Our problem is what we internalize. And when we internalize things, we create inner tension until we set our intention with a T to actually be on something that will serve us better, which is what we must all now do. It is time for us to stop allowing the victim within us to be persecuted and punished and to complain and blame and justify, because those are the actions of a victim. Victims blame, complain, and justify when looking for something or someone outside of themselves to be punished or to punish them, because that is Cartman's drama triangle. And in a culture that is very much moving towards death because of how we are not caring for ourselves, CELLS, and also not caring for one another, aside from protecting the herd, which, are we really animals? Yes. However, we like to think that we're more evolved and have a superiority complex, because that is also what victims need. Victims and bullies need to have a better than, less than dynamic. Whereas what we can do, if we are willing to actually step into our sacred side, is to recognize that no one has to be made less for me being great. And I don't have to be made less for someone else being great. Instead of looking at one another from a comparative perspective and from a competition perspective, what we can see is the fact that if we are willing to be great in and of ourselves without comparing ourselves to anyone else, other than using the past as context and other people's achievements as context for what is possible, that is when we set the new marker for what is possible. The 4-minute mile was not possible until it was, and then suddenly everyone seemed to be able to achieve that, because it was then in the collective consciousness of possibility. And that is what we have a chance to actually do now. With the awareness of the fact the victim also has an empowered aspect and is the part of us that is able to become victorious if we are willing to work through the discomfort of the stories we were more familiar with before, and then the discomfort that comes with transforming our self-image. Then we are able to do what previously was believed to be impossible. Until then, we see that you add an apostrophe and it becomes I am possible. I'm possible is what we could see what was previously impossible to be. I am possible is what can be if we are willing to persist and stick with this new vision, this new version of us that we desire to bring into manifestation. We can do it if we stick with it and move our way through it. So I hope this inspires you to shift where you are willing to put your attention, because where our attention goes, our energy flows. And right now, if our attention is going on to any con video game drama that is conning us of our energy to be present in this moment because it's distracting us into a not now moment, we can choose to continue funding those storylines with our energy, or we can choose to say, no more will I play the victim in its scared side. No more will I react to what others warn me is needed to happen. Scarcity is a sales technique. And so instead of buying into that, will there be shortages? Maybe. It seems very probable. And yet we are also the ones that are working in the positions that need to shift out of thinking that we are property, a citizen, a person, an OPCA litigant, an organized pseudo-legal commercial argument litigant, which is what anyone that is deemed a freeman of the land or one who is trying to use common law as their argument in a court of law, which is land, air, and water, meaning land is the common law where there's a judge in the other two jurisdictions. So when using the argument for one, not protecting ourselves in the others, that is when people fall. Except when we understand how to correct our status to our highest standing, which is as a man or woman in our private capacity with all rights reserved at all times. All common law rights reserved. Not English common law, not King's common law, not natural common law or natural law. Those are forms of legalese that if we believe those to be the truth, that is when then we can drop our status into our personage, which was a term created by man, therefore owned by man, whereas we were born of the grand overall designer, source, creator, the one that we all come through and belong to and feel separate from until we member who and whose we truly are and came here to be as a man or woman, which is why the bill today was passed about the conversion therapy. That is part of the devil's toolbox, to be sure. Because if our young ones can be confused as to what is best for them, they can be used and drop their standing because they think that that is what will give them more choice, when the truth is they become pawns in a game far larger, and their soul is on the line, as is ours. There is much more to be said about all of this, but there is only so much that can be taken in one sitting. So I hope that you will choose to move your inner victim into its sacred side, and to not judge yourself for all the times it has been scared, instead of sitting sacred in the moment. And when you can be gentle with yourself, you then will have more grace to offer others too. I hope this helps. Please do give it a like and leave a comment to let me know what this message means to you, what it means for you, and as always, what you're going to do with it. I look forward to coming to you again very soon. Laura J. Namaste. Namago.